Hi, and thank you for joining me for another session. We're going to continue our look at what adjectives are. Today we're going to focus on something called extreme adjectives or ungradable adjectives, and we're going to look at some examples of good ones and bad ones. I've got my two columns here, okay? For those of you who are starting to learn English, then adjectives are words that describe people, things, objects. But if you're a bit more intermediate or advanced, then you already know that. But what you may not know is that some of them are considered extreme and ungradable. And we're going to look at a few examples and how you can modify them. Okay, so let's crack on. So to start with, we have glorious, which is a lovely word, not used as much as I would like. I don't think you hear it as perhaps used as frequently as you used to, but it's good to get that variety in. So glorious is something that gives you wonder. You know, it's almost godly, yeah. And it is derived from glory, so glorious. Hilarious is something that's very funny. So notice there I've used very with funny, but I wouldn't use it with hilarious. I wouldn't say very hilarious, and we're going to come on to that in a second. But this is something that's so funny you can't get off the floor from laughing, okay? So it really makes you laugh. Perfect. It's as good as it gets. You can't go beyond perfect. There's no more beyond perfect. So it is another extreme adjective. Marvellous, yes, it's a nice one to use actually, and again it's similar to glorious. Perhaps we don't use it as much as we could or should, but it's something that makes you think, wow, okay. And then excellent is already very good, which I'm sure you know. So there, again, I can say very good, but I can't say very excellent, because excellent is already at the end of the scale, okay? So how can we modify them? Can we add any more emphasis? Well, yes, you can. So you don't grade them anymore and you don't use very, but you can use these adverbs, which are modifiers in this case. And you can say really glorious, really hilarious, totally perfect, absolutely marvellous, okay? You're just giving a little bit more emphasis to the word. And how would we describe, why would we use them? Well, some collocations we could use would be glorious weather, hilarious guy, hilarious film, we might say. Okay. So we're describing something that's very funny or a person that's very funny. This is a bit more abstract. We might talk about weather or maybe a painting, something like that, as glorious. Perfect would describe an event, maybe like a wedding or a picnic. You might say, oh, it was a really perfect wedding, okay? Really perfect wedding. Yeah, maybe a marvellous sunset. And maybe you might say excellent service. You're describing something. You've probably seen that sort of collocation, that phrase used a lot. So let's move on over to the bad ones now we have here. Things that describe bad events or bad things. We'll just begin with the adjective itself to start with. Terrible. It's as bad as it gets. Awful. It's quite synonymous. It can't get any worse, right? Horrendous, which I particularly like. I just do. Furious, okay? And freezing. These are extremely bad adjectives as opposed to extremely good. You get the idea. So you can't measure these anymore. They're at the end of the scale, but you can modify them with words like really, absolutely. Okay? I'm going to ignore this bit at the bottom for now because we're going to come on to that in a second or two. So we can say it's absolutely freezing, She's absolutely furious. This is maybe something, you know, when you break your wife's favourite ornament or something. Absolutely furious. It was really horrendous, okay? Really awful, really terrible. So you're adding more emphasis. And then there are some words we might link with the bad adjectives. So we had glorious weather, but we could have terrible weather or awful weather. Or we had excellent service, but we could have awful service. Okay, just to give you some examples. They're quite interchangeable. You could say awful weather, terrible service. And this one is, I try to pick words and phrases that go together quite commonly in English. So horrendous journey is one that I was thinking of. We often use this to describe a journey that's terrible. So a horrendous journey is everything's gone wrong. You know, the train was late, you nearly missed the plane, they lost your luggage. It was horrendous. And then if we're talking obviously furious, we might say people or a person is furious. And freezing can describe you or something, you know, the weather. It's absolutely freezing, okay? So the important thing, we'll put a line, quite a badly drawn line, under this. Because what I want to finish with is just a quick look at what we would consider gradable adjectives. This means you can measure them. And one example of a bad one would be angry. So you can be a bit angry, you can be very angry, okay? And interestingly, you can use really as well. You can say really angry, a bit angry, very angry. But you can't say a bit freezing. So you see now why they are ungradable, but that is gradable because you can use a bit, very, and also really. So a good example of a gradable adjective would be pretty. We can also say very pretty, really pretty. I mean, you could say a bit pretty, but it's probably not that polite. So you'd probably say very pretty or really pretty or just pretty, okay? Yeah, so there are some examples here of extreme adjectives. That means they're not gradable. We can't go beyond them, but we can modify them with these words, okay? And the same with the bad ones here. Can't grade them, you can't go beyond them, but you can use a bit more emphasis. And then we have gradable adjectives. There's plenty of other examples of extreme adjectives, good, bad, and ungradable adjectives, both good and bad. So maybe you have some ideas already. You may already know them. You may have some other ones popping into your head as we speak. So yes, I hope that has helped you today, and thank you for joining me for another lesson, and I hope you can join me again soon. Take care.